Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us on our 17th Central Life service. We have a very special program for you today. We've got the Murphys all the way up from Bedworth. They're going to be doing coffee chats with Sam in his kitchen. It's going to be awesome, so we're just going to cut to those guys.
Good to have you back in Scotland, up here in Sophie's kitchen.
Thank you for having us.
Well, I'll fire on with a few questions, or little icebreaker questions to get started. Okay, first thing, this is a question we've asked a lot of people who have came on midweek, is what has been your lockdown snack? So during lockdown, what has been the thing you've binged on the most?
For me, lots of cheese and lots of crackers.
Okay.
And lots of Ribena.
What kind of cheese?
Very mild, just cheddar, bit of Cheshire, Lancashire cheese. If you've never had Lancashire cheese, nice crumbly cheese.
It's from Lancashire.
That's been my staple in the evenings.
Nice.
Mine has been Lindt dark chocolate with a touch of sea salt. Can't get enough.
Ooh. As in sea salt added afterwards, or?
As in it's in the bar,
In the
already
bar,
made.
okay.
Yes. And I hide it from the kids, and it tastes delicious. Very good.
I'm not sure if your kids would like dark chocolate, salty.
They would try and then spit it out.
Yeah,
and waste it.
Any books you've been reading recently that you can recommend?
A book I read early on in lockdown that was very timely. It was a book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by a guy called John Mark Comer. So it's all about finding rhythms of rest and silence and solitude, which obviously in lockdown we've had a little bit of that, not too much if you're involved in pastoring churches and leading people, but certainly the importance of creating space for reflection and rest and recuperation. That's a good book I've been reading. What about you?
Yeah, I've been trying to read my Bible, and also I'm reading a great parenting book. I try to read a parenting book every year, and I'm reading a parenting book called Parenting Beyond Your Capacity, and it's a Christian-based book that talks all about how planting your kids in a great environment, and that kind of, it takes a village to raise a child, so it takes a church community to raise a child, and everybody has their place. So yeah, great book by Kerry Newhoff and Reggie Joyner.
Nice, brilliant. You've not written a book yet, Danny?
Have I written a book yet? I've written a note on a post-it paper of a book that I intend to write.
Okay,
that's about as far as I've got.
So maybe
not
next,
a full book yet.
Maybe at the next pandemic you might get time to do
10
that.
years from now, I think it'll be completed.
Okay, nice.
Ready to
Great.
buy.
Any programs you've been watching, Netflix, Now TV?
Oh, what did we watch? Oh, This Is Us. I love This Is Us.
This is
Have you watched that?
Best thing.
I've not watched that. No.
Oh.
Mark has recommended it to me though.
Mark, you emotional man. That's good. Yeah, This Is Us is that's a good TV
Brilliant.
series. What else have
Love
we
it.
watched?
Not much, actually. We've been busy Zooming. Our life
Yes,
has been Zoom.
you've been
and
watching
meetings,
Zoom.
watching people on
We
Zoom.
do
and
what the thing to unwind at the end of the day with is episodes of Would I Lie to You? Have you ever watched that panel show on BBC?
Yeah, I've seen clips of it.
Lee Mack and who's the other guy? David.
I can't remember his name, but Danny laughs a lot, and that's important to me because after busy, stressful days, he unwinds, and we just laugh watching that before bed.
So Would I Lie to You? I'd recommend
Would I
that.
Lie to You,
All
yeah.
episodes are on YouTube.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll maybe check that out and see.
Yeah.
A
see
bit
how
of
we're going.
comedy.
Yeah, a bit of comedy to help. But best and worst bit about being back in Scotland?
Without a doubt, fresh fish
Okay.
would be number one. So
We've
I've-
just given up on it, haven't we?
I've tried
Ordering.
fish in about 16 chip shops in the Midlands, and all the fish is grey and quite rotten and quite smelly. So we got Finley's last night, and that was a
Nice.
treat. So Finley's, haddock, and some prawns. That was number one. And I think the coast. I had took a bit of a walk along the beach the other day as well, because we now live the furthest away from the coast you can be in the UK. So be appreciative of the sea.
Yes.
Worst bit? Is there a worst bit?
The worst bit?
Yeah, best and worst bit.
There is nothing bad about
Nothing
Scotland
bad.
at all. And if there were, I would not say it on camera before an audience of Scottish people.
You know that everybody's waiting for the outlaw joke, right?
Oh yeah, the mother-in-law. No. No, I love it.
Oh, we tried to set it up for you so well.
No, I love being back with the family, don't I?
Yeah,
And love being back in Scotland. There's nothing, I think.
It's
It's a bad
hilarious
place,
because I'm not Scottish, as you know. I'm a bit of a gypsy, but I class this as home, and it's funny that Danny does as well. That this is home for us. So and I think it will be for forever probably. It's a big part of our hearts being here.
Brilliant.
So yes, my best bits is seeing friends and family, definitely, and catching up with people. But I do really appreciate the scenery. You don't know what you've got till it's gone.
Yeah.
And worst bits. I don't know. I think I've a little bit turned into a southern softie with the weather, so it's a little bit cooler. Down.
You're looking very tanned.
It's a little bit warmer
Yeah.
down south.
You can tell who's been working in lockdown and who's been in the garden.
Who's been doing PE lessons, homeschooling in the garden. That's what I've been doing. Lots of PE.
Nice.
So.
That's good. That's good. Okay, so you were in Fraserburgh for 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
For 9 years. Is there an achievement? I mean, you achieved a lot when you was here, but is there an achievement that you think of? Oh, I was really proud of that. Whilst we were here.
That's a tough one. I think just having great friends and family around us, that was something that was really, really special for me. Being up here, I can't think of anything that's directly down to us. It was just watching people grow and learning and figuring out, building God's kingdom together. And I think, the church progressed a lot in the season we were here, but that was a team effort all around, wasn't it? There was an achievement. So
I would say you doing what you're doing now is one of the proudest
me
achievements of our journey.
yeah.
And not that was down to us, that was other people and yourself as well, Sam, but seeing you step up and grow, become the man of God you now are, the youth pastor you are today.
Oh, I feel.
But no, not just seeing you and others like you really grow in God and really discover the personal purpose that you had for your life. I think the privilege of just being part of the team here and hopefully creating a culture where people could grow, discover their gifts and start to have the courage to step into the call of God that was upon their lives was, I think for me, that would have been the most satisfying part of our time here in the journey.
Oh, wow. If I was emotional, I'd cry.
But you lost all that many years ago.
I'm not. So I shall smile and nod my head in acceptance. No, thank you. That's very nice. Yeah. Okay. Question 3.
Sincere.
I'm going very red. What would you say to? So you came up in 2010, which is 10 years ago now, a decade. Quite a long time. What would you say to a 2010 Dan and Naomi as you're in the car, you're coming up to Scotland, you've made the move to come up north? What would you say to yourselves having done it now?
Do you want to go first on that one?
I would in jest say try not to fall in love with the place or the people too much, because as many of you know, I broke my heart leaving here, and I went through a real period of grieving to leave Fraserburgh and the people and the friends and family that we had here. So but I jest, it's really just recognizing that God's in control and to hold that lightly. Our plans, somebody said once, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. And probably that I'd recognize that actually ultimately, God, you're in control and you can move us, change things at any time that you want. But I still would build wholeheartedly like I was here forever, and that's what we're trying to do as well, where we are in Bedworth, that we put in roots and we build forever, because I think if you don't, you're always looking over the fence for the next thing that's coming along, and that's not a healthy place to live. I think you give your all to what God's called you to in that moment, and I would still do that all over again, and have my heart broken all over again.
I think I would tell myself to make sure you get a Doric dictionary very early, because for at least the first 2 years of being here, I spent my life nodding and smiling, having no idea what people were saying to me generally. Other than that, I think I would say to myself, make sure you value people more than programs. I think the first few years of being here, and obviously it was youth ministry and it was all about constructing something new and something that was going to make a difference in young people's lives. So I'm not saying we don't emphasize activity and projects and programs, but I think the person I became at the end of my time here understood that the more time you give to people, the more fruitful ministry will be. It's not necessarily about our projects, it's not about our programs, but it's about loving people. And I think I learned that lesson while I was here, but I wish I'd learned the lesson earlier than I did. So that's probably what I would say to myself moving up.
That's a great bit of advice from both of you. Really good. You have a lot of strengths, and you were so important for everyone in Fraserburgh, and we saw your strengths. But being a little bit real just now, what would you say your weaknesses are, and how do you deal with those weaknesses?
You go first.
My biggest weakness is probably that I struggle to focus on just one thing at a time. So I'm always looking at what's next, and the downside of that is that you can easily become distracted and end up not doing the one thing that God's maybe asking you to focus on at that time very well. So I think for me, and you probably would back this up, at times taking on more than I should at certain times and in certain seasons.
Yeah, he's got lots of strengths too. I think for me, I would say that I can often probably make a judgment about myself quickly of who I am and who I'm not, and actually knowing that it's a journey of discovery, and God's putting new things on our lives all the time, and there's new seasons, and there's things that weren't appropriate in one season that are now appropriate for the next season, and having the freedom and grace to walk in that, because sometimes I can just go, oh, that's not me, or I do that but I don't do that, and allowing God to work through me in that way. I think sometimes I can put him in a box in my life and say that's not for now, when really he's saying something different. So yeah,
so both kind of similar things actually. So focusing on one thing, doing what God's calling to at that time. So as a kind of backup from that, how do you know what is the right thing to focus on? So how do you know when you're doing too much, and how do you know when you're not doing enough? How do you know when there's too much going on in your diary, and how do you balance that out? So
I think knowing when home and work life is out of balance, I think that's an indicator that you're probably doing things that God's maybe not asked you to do. So I know in the journey we've had in even the last 18 months, and again, it's been an intense time of having to rebuild and repurpose a church. There have been times where I've looked at what I'm doing, and not everything has been necessarily urgent or even important. It's just things that I've maybe built into my diary because there've been expectations from other people, not things that necessarily God's asking us to focus on and calling us to do. So I think understanding what are the big things that only God has entrusted to you, and focusing on those are crucial in not getting to that point where you're doing things that are just born out of other people's expectations. And there are only a handful of things that God's entrusted to you, and your family is the most important in my opinion. And there's times where if I see that's not being given as much attention as it should be, then the likelihood is I'm doing certain things that God's not intending me to do.
I think for me, I did a study with my Connect girls at AOG Central, and we did a study a few years ago called The Best Yes by Lisa Turkhurst, and it very much goes along the theme of when Paul talks about everything is permissible but not all things are beneficial. And you quickly realise that what are my choices in life? Is my choice to go to the nightclub, or shall I go to church? And it's easy; those decisions are easy to make. But actually, there becomes more and more decisions that you go, well, that's good and that's good. What are you asking me to do, God? Because I can't do both of them. And there's a best yes for you personally. There's a best yes for your family. So while you could be chasing something that's ministry, that's building the kingdom, if you're neglecting for me, my responsibility as a mum, then that's probably not my best yes in that season. And I guess it's recognising those seasons all the time. But yeah, I think you have to go to God all the time and say, am I doing this because you're asking me to, or am I doing this because I feel an expectation because people look on and think I should be doing that, or that person's doing that, so should I be doing that? And actually having security to say the best yes for me and for my family is this is what God's asking me to do. And that's been key for me to find a security in knowing what God's asking me to do. And then, you know, sometimes you feel insecure in those moments of going, God's asking me to do this and it's bigger than what I think I can do. But when God's asking, it's different than when other people are putting that on you and creating stress in your life. That's
good. I think over lockdown, I know for me personally, it's been very much a time where you can reflect and look at, okay, so this has been my life, so what actually needs to change? And I think a lot of people I've spoken to during this time, it's been, okay, this needs to change my life, I need to do this, I need to sort this chaos out, I need to sort this, like I'm doing this too much. So thinking about that, how would you kind of advise people coming out of a lockdown? How would you advise them to kind of restructure their lives? Maybe things have been off balance, so maybe kids have been forgotten about, or maybe the home life has been off balance to work. How would you advise people to move forwards following lockdown when things do get back to normal? How would you advise them to do that?
I would say get that time with God and take each thing to him. You know, God, no thing's too big or too small. We might think that, you know, praying over whether our kid is in that football team or that football team is a bit ridiculous, but asking God to guide us on different things. But actually it matters, and if it's impacting your family on a bigger picture, I think, you know, God wants to know about every detail of our life. So up in that relationship with God is obvious, but so easily neglected. I would say that, but then I just go back to the expectations. Where's the expectation coming from? What's the root of that, and why are you feeling the pressure to do that? Because if you're feeling pressure that's coming from other places, you need to address that and say, what's the root of that, and why am I allowing that to be dictated in my life? That's what I'd say.
I think it's probably a process of removing things rather than adding things to your life. Yeah. So in the new structuring, I think, as we've touched on, there's probably things that God has wanted to reveal in this season that he wants us to remove rather than shine the spotlight on things he wants us to add and build into our lives moving forward. And I think for me, it's reflecting on what are the things that have eternal value. So the Bible says, doesn't it, don't fix your eyes on things that are temporal, but fix your eyes on things that are eternal and the unseen stuff. And I think there's so many times in our lives that we fixate our diaries on things that have no eternal value and eternal significance. And if we drill down to the handful of things that have eternal significance, which is building God's kingdom, which is raising a great family, which is looking at how he can transform community, then everything else pales into insignificance. So I think being driven by eternity and not being driven by the temporal, I think is the biggest lesson for all of us coming out of this season of lockdown.
I think as well, sorry, I'm maybe going on a little bit, but I was chatting with a friend, a close friend and mentor of mine really, and we're talking about the concept of Sabbath and the rest, and people, how guilty we can feel for having rest. And I'm in a season where you don't get much rest. Three kids, you know, it's always busy. But she was talking about the principle. She was just telling me about the principle, reading it in a book, that, you know, God's ordained rest, but also when we give it to him, and kind of like the tithe, if we tithe it 10%, if we give that time that God's asking us to give, like we do with our finances, we all can testify that the 90% goes further when we're obedient with the 10%. And being obedient and having good times of rest and restoration for our soul, actually trusting God that all that list of things that you need to get done, that you'll be more effective, that you'll have favor, that all that kind of stuff flows out of obedience to your relationship with God. I'd say that.
Yeah, brilliant, great advice. I think for me personally, I think what I've found, like in lockdown, I think I was giving a lot out. So like not just in church life, but in like guitar lessons and obviously church life and like different aspects. And I think for me, I've just kind of got to a point where I'm like, I need to actually bring input into all those areas as well. So I think it is important, isn't it, to like take things, like we've had everything taken away from us, so we're actually able to look and be like, okay, well, what actually have we got to play with here? And what, if I'm going to continue to use my guitar lessons as an example, I've consciously then sought to get lessons now, or some sort of online lessons, because actually I want to improve in that area. And I think it's the same for a lot of things in our lives over this time. Good. So just to finish just now, if you had any words of encouragement for the people watching, maybe they're in Fraserburgh or Peterhead, Bedworth, or wherever they may be, what would it be? So if you were to just encourage people just now, what would it be?
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
A couple of things. God's got this, so God's in control. So this current season has felt very paralysing, I think, for some people, because they've not had control of their lives in the way that they ordinarily feel they would. But God's still sovereign. God's in control. God's not caused this, but he has got a plan and purpose that I believe he's out working through it. And for me, I think two of the things that God will bring about on the other side of this season will be a renewed appreciation for worship and a real fruitfulness in his church. Yeah. So I'm inspired by the journey of Noah. So that's been quite an important narrative in Scripture for me during this season, because Noah went through a period of lockdown. So he was locked up in an ark for over a year, well longer than the time that we've currently been in lockdown. And when he came out of the ark, there were two things that he did first and foremost. The first thing was he built an altar and he worshipped the Lord, and he thanked him for his faithfulness and his provision in that time of lockdown. And I think we're all at that point now where we can't wait to get back and worship, where we're missing just being with other Christians and being able to lift up the name of Jesus together. And I think there is going to be a different atmosphere and a different shift in the spiritual atmosphere when it comes to our worship when we gather again on the other season. So I think that's an exciting thing to look forward to. Yep. And I also really believe that there's fruitfulness. So the second thing that Noah did was he planted a vineyard and he made some wine. And what that speaks of was that he had the faith to believe that there was still fruitfulness in his future despite the barrenness of his present. And in this season, we've had a lot stripped away, as we've talked about. There's certain things that probably will never be the same again. And yet I believe there's going to be fruitfulness like we've never seen before. We've seen people look at online church that have never looked before. 50%, I think, there's been a 50% increase in Bible sales in online bookshops in the time we've been in lockdown. So there's a spiritual awakening happening in people's hearts, and I think the church is going to be bursting at the seams on the other side of this. So we've got to get ourselves ready for the fruitfulness that I think is to come.
Yeah. What he said, but also I just think we need to be really careful how we measure success in this period. You know, we can be saying and hoping that God's doing something, but we actually know in our gut that God's always doing something. God's always moving. He's always working for our favour and for our good and building his kingdom. He will build his kingdom. And I think what we might do when we go back after this is maybe be a little bit disappointed at the people we thought might have returned to church, might have came to know God, but actually we don't know. We might never know. It might, to us, we want it to be churches bursting at the seams, but actually what's going on in people's hearts in their living rooms is just as important, and only eternity will tell what God's done in this time, the significance that's been achieved. And to make it all about us and what we know really limits what God can do and is doing in this period. So actually just to trust God that, those loved ones that you want to see running back to church, that maybe they are in their hearts and there's something happening behind the scenes that we may never see the fruit of, but that it will tell a story, and God is still moving and doing something in this time.
Brilliant. Thank you. If those people here, they clap because that was brilliant, but there's nobody here. But thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming through, and we appreciate everything you've done in Fraserburgh and what you continue to do as well, because you're coming on things like this, and we really do appreciate it, and we thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. Thank you.
In my kitchen.
Miss everyone.
We do.
And hopefully, post-lockdown, we'll get up properly and be able to see everyone soon.
That would be great.
Thank you to the Murphys for that. That was incredible. I know I got a lot out of that. Running this week throughout the church, we have got our school uniform bank, which is like a food bank, except it's for school uniforms. So if you know anyone who would benefit from that, send us down to the church throughout the week and we'll get them some school uniforms. And on Sunday at 10:30, we have our central service. It is going to be amazing. We'll see you there.